Story about love, okay, because love is good, alright? And then we'll have a break, and then we might go about craft. And what I do as well is I always have my cup of tea because my throat is very parched. So this is a story from one of my other books, but don't worry about it. This is a story, and it's from County Clare, okay? And it's a story, is anybody here from County Clare?
Yeah.
That man! Well, he will back me up. Can I ask your name? What's your second name?
Martin.
So this Martin will back me up on this story, okay? He will know this story, he will back me up. So this is a story from County Clare. And it's a story from 500 years ago. And I'm very, very briefly going to go into history here. And I hope I get it right, but if I get it wrong, somebody's going to tell us, okay? So, basically, this is a very, very condensed history of Ireland over the last 3,000 years. Irish people doing their thing, Anglo-Normans come, they do their thing, which kind of involves fighting Irish folk fighting Anglo-Normans, and then the Anglo-Normans become Irish, and then they all kind of mix, and then the English send more English to come, and then there's English, and Old English, and Irish, and New Irish, and they all kind of fight. They also kind of make love and sing and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of fighting, alright? And you've got all these big, big families, and the families are expanding in power and shrinking in power. And one of those families was the family Quinn, okay? And the Quinn family, they kind of claimed their ancestor was Queen Maeve of Connaught, okay? So they kind of, a big history. So the Quinn family, they kind of expanded, and then they shrank. The power was shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And it got to the point where the new leader of the Quinn family, a guy called Connor Quinn, he was wanting to try and at least stop his family shrinking anymore. He wanted to keep his power as it was. He didn't want to kind of lose any more power and hopefully build power back up, alright? And so he had a lovely kind of mansion he lived in, and beside the mansion was a long lake. It was a beautiful lake. And then he had kind of tenants and stuff in his land. He owned woods, trees and stuff. And he worked very hard. He was trying to do the politicking and the kind of investments, and he was trying to kind of expand family's power again. And it was hard work. But one of the things he liked to do to kind of help himself relax was he would take himself a walk along this lake, okay? He'd walk along the lake. And at the far end of the lake, there was some ruins. It was like a ruined castle. And this was very important to him, okay? Because this ruin, this was part of his family's, this ruin was going back 1,000 years. And it was a castle, it was like the base of his family, going all the way back. And there was all these stories about, the last battle, when it was up against their enemies, they were there at their castle, and it always won through the day. It always managed to win through. So it was a really good thing for him. He'd leave his house, his lovely fine mansion. He'd walk the length of the lake. He'd let all his worries and his troubles of the day kind of just drift away. And he'd go and sit in this ruin, and he would reflect on his family and his ancestors. And he would know that he would get his power back someday. He was going to come back. So one summer he was doing this. It was late at night, and he was taking a walk along the lake. And the sun was beginning to set. And he got to the far end of the lake there, and he was sat there amongst the ruins. And he sat there and he's reflecting, and he's looking at the sun, and the sky's getting golden. And he's looking down the length of the lake towards where his house is. And even beyond that, further down the lake, and he saw 3 wee white dots on the water. And as he was watching them, the 3 wee white dots began to move along the water, coming towards him. As he got closer, he saw it was 3 swans. 3 very beautiful swans. As they get closer still, he was amazed at the way they glided on the water. They almost seemed to be connected to each other like a psychic wave, the way they moved on the water. And they were gliding closer and closer, and as they got closer, he could see they were quite large swans, and they were dazzling white, they were very beautiful, majestic, and they were coming nearer and nearer towards him. And then part of him began to think, I hope they come ashore here. I hope they come all the way up to this end of the lake. Because there was a lovely kind of grassy bit in front of him there. He was hoping, I hope they come here. So he hid behind a rock, and he was kind of looking. And as he hid there, sure enough, the swans came closer and closer and closer. And finally, they actually came up to the very end of the lake. And just as he wanted, and just as he hoped, the 3 swans stepped out of the water. They were only like 10 yards from him, right at the edge of the lake there. And they stepped out of the water. These 3 huge, dazzling, white, magnificent birds, okay? And they stepped out the water, and when they stepped out the water, they came onto the grassy bank there, and then they done that thing that swans do. They stretched their wings, and they stretched their necks, and they curled, and he was watching how beautiful they were. And he was looking at them, and then as he was watching them, a strange thing happened. There's an awful sound like ripping meat. And out of the breast of each swan, well, the breast opened, and something began to stick out. And he was horrified. And then what he realised was sticking out was fingers. And in the moment, the fingers grabbed the swan body and then pulled it apart. And then as he watched, 3 women stepped out. From each swan, a woman stepped out. And she stepped out, and the swan cloak fell to the ground. Okay? And now there was 3 beautiful women standing on the edge of the lake. And he was looking at them, and he was mesmerised. For the sun was setting, and the gold of the sun was on their skin, it was on their arms, on their breast, on their hips, on their legs. They glowed, their bodies glowed. And he was looking at these beautiful, glowing women, and he could see from their faces that they were sisters. There was an older one, a middle one, and a younger one. And they were standing there, these 3 beautiful women. And as he was watching, the 3 of them began to move. And they came closer and closer to him. And now they were only a few yards away from the rock. And the 3 women kind of turned towards each other and made a small circle. And then the women began to dance. And it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. For when one woman dipped, the other 2 would dip. If one stepped back, the other 2 would step back. It was almost as if they were connected like a wave, like a psychic wave was going through the 3 of them. They moved in perfect unison. And he sat behind the rock, and he's watching this. And all the time the sun is getting a deeper gold and a deeper red, and their skins are now glowing, and their hair is black as raven's wings, and they're the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, and the way they're dancing. And he's absolutely mesmerised. And he can feel himself almost kind of falling into the rhythm of that dance. Ah! And the next thing, the woman leaped up and began shouting and roaring, and they were banging the ground and banging their heads and slapping their asses, and they started whipping and rolling round and round like dead issues. They looked insane, they were screaming, ah! And they were going absolutely mad. It was like a volcanic power in the 3 of them. There was no sanity at all. They were just beating the ground and roaring and screaming. And poor wee Connor, he's watching them, and he's watching them roaring and screaming and roaring and screaming, and he's looking at them, and the sweat's coming after, the sweat splatting on him. He's thinking, woman's sweat, naked woman's sweat, oh my God. And he's looking at them, they're scraping, they're jumping, they're leaping, and oh my God, he thought, I'm going in there. And he jumped over the rock. Ah! And the 3 women looked at him and they went, ah! And they ran. Okay. They ran. They saw he looked madder than they did. Ah! Woman! So they ran, the 3 of them ran. And as they ran, he of course chased them, okay? The madness was on him now. He was going to get himself a woman, okay? So he ran after them. And the oldest of the Swan Maidens, she got down to the very edge of the lake, and she grabbed her swan cloak, and she put it on herself, and she stretched out an arm and it turned into a wing. She stretched out the other arm and it turned into a wing. And she turned back into a swan, and she beat her magnificent wings, and she flew across the lake. And the second sister, she ran down, she grabbed her swan cloak, she got it on her, she transformed into a swan, and she swam off, flew off as well across the lake. But the third sister, the youngest one, She was running and she tripped. She tripped on the ground. And Connor could see her lying there in front of him and he ran up. But he didn't grab her. He ran past her. He got to the edge of the lake and he grabbed her cloak. He grabbed her swan cloak. And then he turned around and without even looking at her, he began to walk the length of the lake. And he walked all the length of the lake carrying the swan robe. And eventually came to his great mansion. And he went in the door there. And there was a great hallway and lovely furnishings and tapestries. And the servants had lit a great fire. And he went up to the great fire holding the swan cloak. And he got to the great fire. When he got to the great fire, finally he turned around. And of course, as he knew she would be, the Swan Maiden was behind him. She had followed him, for she was in his power because he had her cloak. And she was standing in the hall there, and she looked at him. And she didn't weep, and she didn't beg, she just looked straight at Connor Quinn, and she said, I know what you want of me. You want me to be your wife, to be your willing wife. Well, so be it. I will be your wife. I will be your willing wife in all things. However, there are conditions. And Connor Quinn looked and said, name them. She said, well, first of all, do not burn my cloak. Give me a room of my own. I will hang the cloak up. And you'll not touch it? No, I'll not touch it because there's two more conditions. If you keep to them, what are those conditions? She said, well, first of all, you have to give up gambling. For gambling is a sin. And Connor said, what's the second condition? She said, well, the second condition is you allow no member of the O'Brien family into your house. For the O'Briens are enemies of me and mine. And Connor Quinn, he almost burst out laughing. He said, well, you know what? The O'Briens are enemies of me and mine as well. You'll never have them in this house. I accept your conditions. I'll give you a room for your cloak and yourself. I will give up gambling, and there'll never be an O'Brien in this house. And so it was agreed, and he called his servants, and they brought beautiful clothes for her, and they dressed her, and they gave her a room of her own. The stairs led up to the next level. There was a room there, and she was given that room. And she hung the cloak up, and that was it. And within a month, they were wed. And it was a magnificent wedding. All the great and good of Ireland, all the lords and the bishops and all the politics and all the merchants, they all came to this fabulous wedding. And the strange thing about the wedding is the moment he wed this woman, the Swan Maiden, the minute he married her, suddenly his fortune changed. And even at the wedding, people were quite impressed the way he was dressed and the beauty of his wife. And people come up to him and started talking to him and making deals even at the wedding. And slowly his fortune changed. And next thing, he had a bit more money, he could buy back some of his lost land and make more investments, and his power began to grow. And a year later, a son was born. His wife gave birth to a boy. And this, of course, was a great thing because now folk knew the family was going to continue into the future. There was a son that was going to carry on. And a year after that, a daughter was born. And this was a magnificent thing as well. A daughter meant he had somebody who could marry off and make alliances with. So now his power is growing, his family's getting more powerful, he's getting a lot more respect. When he's walking about, people are talking to him, and he's doing very well. He could even pause sometimes with a cup of tea and not worry. 7 years went by. 7 years exactly from the day he first saw the Swan Maiden. 7 years went by. And the races were on. The horse racing was on in County Clare. Okay? And for those who don't know horse racing in this part of the world, and maybe it's the same in other parts of the world, horse racing has nothing to do with horses, okay? Or at least the horses are just part of it, okay? Horse racing is about meeting people, and it's about shaking hands, and passing on envelopes full of money and making deals and all that kind of thing, okay? So the horse racing was on, and of course he was very powerful now, and he was going to go down there and he was going to make even more deals, okay? And just show how magnificent he was. So he went down to the horse racing, and it was a magnificent day. He made a lot of deals, he talked to a lot of people. Some folk he just gave advice to, and they respected his advice. Other folk, they asked him to kind of join them in wee trades and stuff. And it was a great day for him, okay? And of course, he kept his word. He never put even a penny on the horses. He did not gamble, okay? So then the evening came on, and everybody's kind of retired. They went into a tavern there, okay? And the nice thing about the horses is that everybody goes in. Well, every man goes in. And it's like from the poorest to the richest men, they're all mingling in this tavern. And they're all drinking and full of joy and happiness. And of course, Connor is there as well, Connor Quinn. And he's feeling very good, and he's buying beer for folk. And somebody asks him, they say, Connor Quinn, you never put any money on the horses. What's that about? Do you not miss gambling on the horses? He said, you know what? I don't need to gamble. I don't need any more money. I'd rather other folk won. Folk need money more than I do. Somebody said, but everybody needs a bit more money. We all need a bit more in life. And Connor Quinn said, do you know what? I do not need anything. I have everything I want. I have my magnificent house. It's full of tapestries from China and from India. I've got beautiful tables and furnishings. I've got statues from Greece and Rome. I have my beautiful house. Inside my house I have my lake, and it's so full of beautiful fish. The fish are so packed in, you could walk across their backs. I own woods with trees bigger than some folks' houses. I have such riches. I have land with corn, wheat and barley as high as an elephant. I have all this. And of course, I have a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful children. They're as beautiful as angels themselves. I had no sooner speaking than suddenly a voice cried out, ah, listen to yourself there. Listen to you, Connor Quinn. Listen to the way you're talking about your trees and your fish and your house and your wife and your wains. They're like angels, are they? What does that make you? Are you God? Are you Jesus? Is that what he tells you, Jesus? Maybe we should call a big barrel of water. You can turn it into wine for us. Or maybe you could walk on it. Could you do that for us, Connor Quinn? Could you walk on the water? And a silence went round this pub. This was mockery of a very high level. And folk kind of went, because there was going to be a reply to this. Okay? And Connor Quinn stood for a moment. And then he said, come out of the shadows there so I can see you. And the stranger came out of the shadows and he looked at him, and everybody else is finding what's going to go on here, but Connor Quinn was a clever man, and he said to him, listen, sir, I hope that you are as honest a man as you are foul-mouthed. Said folk. What do you mean by that? Said the man. What do you mean by that? And Connor Quinn said, listen, I will take you and I will show you that everything I have said is true. I will show you my trees. I will show you my lake. I will show you my fields. I'll show you my house. I cannot show you my wife and my children, for they sleep, but I can show you my tapestries, my furnishings. And if you're as honest a man as you say you are, if you are an honest man, you will see it all. You will see that I have spoke truly. And you will come back here and you will tell everybody here that I spoke true. And the stranger said, so be it. I'll come then. And so the both of them left the tavern. And they got on their horses and they began racing through the night. And they were racing, and the wind was blowing, and the moon was up there, and the trees were rustling, and they were racing through the night. And as they were racing through the night, of course they were talking. And Connor Quinn said to the strangers who were racing by, she said, I kind of know your face, but I don't know who you are. And the stranger said, well, you maybe know my face, because I look very much like the rest of my family. I am one of the O'Briens. And Connor Quinn went, back to the stranger, I am the new leader of the family O'Brien. father has died, and I am the new power in my family. And poor Connor Quinn, he's riding there, and he's thinking, oh my goodness, I've invited O'Brien back to the house, this is not good. But another part of him's thinking, but it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, the wife's asleep, and she will never, ever know. Okay? Men, write this down. The wife will know. Okay? Write that down now. So it's like, okay, come on. So they're riding on, and then he slows down. He says, well, we're almost at my land here. Here's my fields with the wheat as high as an elephant. And O'Brien says, I see that. And then they come to the woods, and of course there's the big trees, huge trees. And O'Brien goes, yes, I see your trees. And as they come to the lake, sure, there's fish leaping in the lake. The moon's kind of glowing off them. And O'Brien says, you have beautiful fish there as well. And Connor says, no, come to my house. And he's thinking, he's just going to take him into the house for 1 minute, and then send him on his way. So he brings him into the house. And the O'Brien steps into his house. And Connor Quinn says, look, my tapestries from India and China, my furnishings, my statues, it's all true. And O'Brien looks about and goes, yeah, it is all true. And Connor Quinn says, so, you will go back to the tavern now and tell everybody that I spoke truly. And O'Brien said, sure, I will leave now if you want me to. I'll leave now if you want me to. And I'll go back to the tavern and I'll tell them that everything you said was true. That you get trees as big as houses. You get a lake filled with fish you can walk on. You get wheat as high as elephants, and you get tapestry from all over the world. I'll tell everybody everything is true, but I'll also tell them that yours, Connor Quinn, is the worst hospitality in the whole of Ireland. But here am I in your house, and you've not even so much as offered me a drink. And this, of course, is the worst thing that could ever be said about a gentleman. And Connor Quinn recognised that. He said, I was just too excited. My apologies, of course. I was going to give you food and drink before you left. And he looked around, and there was a kind of side table there, and his servants had put out bottles of wine, and there was a kind of, there was food there, there was dry meat, and there was cheese and bread. He said, sit down by the fire. And so the O'Briens sat by the fire. Connor Quinn got him wine, got a bottle of wine open, and he got over a plate with meat and cheese and fruit. And they sat there, and they began to eat, and they began to drink. Okay? And they're drinking away, and as they're drinking away, the O'Brien said to him, this is wonderful. Your family and my family have been enemies for centuries. The terrible things we've had, there's been murder, there's been battles, and here are you and I sat at the fire, we're eating cheese together, we're drinking wine together, and Connor's going, it's wonderful. And the O'Brien says, oh, we should have some more wine. And Connor says, sure, more wine. And he opens another bottle of wine, boop, and he pours out more wine, and it's lovely wine, and he's drinking the wine, and O'Brien's drinking the wine, and now they get all chubby and chatting away, and O'Brien's going, you know what, the future's going to be wonderful, we can make alliances and do so much together. And Connor Quinn's going, yeah, this is fantastic. And then the O'Brien says, now we're good old friends, now we're like old friends. And Connor Quinn says, we are. And O'Brien says, well, you know, like old friends, maybe we should play cards together like friends do. And he brought out cards. And they began to play the cards. And we're playing away, and then O'Brien said, you know what? You can't really play cards without a wee bet. And Connor Quinn said, sure, let's put a wee bet on. And so he began to gamble with the O'Brien in his house. And he won the first couple of games, and he lost a few games, and then he began to lose seriously. He began to lose all his money. And then he lost all the fields with the wheat, and he lost the woods, and he lost the lake. And the more he lost, the more he gambled, the more determined he was going to win, and he lost the tapestries, the furnishings, until finally all he had left was the very house itself, the shell of the house. And suddenly he's realising how foolish he has been. And the O'Brien looks at him, and the O'Brien says, do you know what? I've taken so much off you. I want to give it back. We'll have one last game. If you lose, I take your house. But if you win, I'll give you back everything, and I'll match it. I'll give you double what you've given me. One more game. And it was at this point Connor Quinn realised how foolish he had been, and he went, "No, no, no!" And he grabbed a hold of the Brian, he dragged him across the hall, he took him to the front door, and he threw him outside. And he threw him outside into the morning, for the sun was beginning to rise. And he turned around and he slammed the door shut, and he turned back into the hall. As he turned into the hall, he looked up the stairs, and there stood his wife. She stood at the top of the stairs in front of her room. And Connor Quinn, suddenly an awful sense of fear and grief and foolishness came on him, and he ran up the stairs going, "I'm sorry, wife, I'm so sorry. It was just a mistake." But she turned around, she went into her room, and she slammed the door. And Connor Quinn went up to the door, and he kind of tapped the door, there was no reply, and he gently opened the door, and he stepped in. And there was his wife. She was in the room, and she had her son, and she had her daughter. And in her hand was a swan cloak. And in some accounts it said she wept, and other accounts say she smiled. But personally, I think she probably done both. She wept, she smiled, she took the swan cloak, and she put it on. And when she put it on, she began to transform into a swan. And as her arm turned into a wing, she touched her daughter, and her daughter turned into a beautiful swan as well. And she stretched out her other arm, and it turned into a wing, and she touched her son, and her son turned into a beautiful swan. And then the three great birds went up to the open window there, and outside the sun was rising, and they leapt up, and all three of them flew away, and Connor Quinn never saw them again. And that was the very final ruin of Connor Quinn. Thank you.